Just a reminder that when we are on this journey together, it's our primary task in Mussar is to focus on ourselves. So just a reminder to avoid using phrases like, other people do this, or sometimes I see people doing that. And we also want to make sure that we're not giving each other advice, or we're not sort of reacting directly or commenting on what other people say, because that, that can have unintended consequences, but also distracts from our primary focus, which is on working on our own journey. So is everybody just on board with that? Thumbs up, we good? Okay, cool.
Question.
Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah. Is it okay if to say, when I'm feeling like that, I find this works for me, but is that advice?
That's giving advice.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So just just sort of speak to your own. I want to say speak to your own experience, but not sort of in that, in that context. Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And I think many of us want to help. We want to kind of, we're not offering advice because we're trying to be hurtful. We're trying to be helpful. But sometimes, what we think is like the right advice just doesn't turn out to be appropriate for that situation. So it's sort of a discipline for all of us. And it's part of the Mussar practice to kind of hold back what might seem like a natural inclination. Any other questions? All right, well then, may I have a volunteer to read this first our discussion prompt? Just unmute yourself and read.
I would, but I don't have my glasses.
Okay.
Greg, I can read it.
Well, Janet, since you asked the question, would you mind reading this?
Many people worry about their own stomachs and the state of other people's souls. The real task is to do the opposite, to worry about other people's stomachs and the state of your own soul.
Thanks, Janet. So a question that comes to mind, there's a number of things that come to mind, but one is, why is it so much harder to kind of focus on your own soul? And why is it harder to kind of talk about, your own journey, kind of like what we were just saying? And sometimes it can be easier to say, well, I think the issue is the people, feel insecure. But the reality is, and I am speaking for myself, I do feel sometimes a little bit insecure about sharing my own journey, or sharing kind of what's going on for me. So I'm curious what other people have to say. What is, why is this such a challenge to kind of look within?
Well, nobody wants to be laughed at or made fun of. So if you open your own pain, sometimes it's not taken real seriously, and that's very hurtful. You say, well, I'm feeling this, and somebody says, oh, well, so-and-so is suffering through blah, blah, blah. It's much worse than what you're going through. And, oh, you have stage 1 breast cancer. I know somebody with terminal cancer, blah, blah. And that's very hurtful, because your journey is your journey, and your pain is your pain. And even though it looks small from the outside, it's not small to you.
Yeah.
So to reveal that and have that kind of response, which you do get sometimes, can be horrifying, really. It can be really destructive.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Yeah, it certainly is. And, who else?
Okay, I was going to say, it's because we have a fear of being vulnerable. And we, like the lady said, it's fear of being judged, and to really explain your sensations and your feelings it can be hurtful to people, but it's that vulnerability to take that, to trust in the way of doing it, because, you know, once you do let it out, I believe it helps, you know, it starts to heal.
So is that what you find when you let things out? You find
Yeah.
a healing experience?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. Carrie.
What about feeling like you're imposing by putting yourself out there? A lot of us might feel like it's an imposition, or we don't want to take up somebody's time or burden anybody, you know, and that's different from not wanting to be judged. I mean, I do believe that a lot of us are afraid to be vulnerable, but I also think that a lot of us feel that we might be imposing on someone.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. Yeah, absolutely. That's another factor that can sort of come into play. And how does Mussar help us with some of these issues about being vulnerable, or sort of having a concern about imposing on others? How might Mussar play into that?
Can you explain that a little bit more? Because me not being Jewish.
Sure. Well, we're, you know, here doing a Mussar practice together.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at something like, you know, we start taking the, you know, because one other piece, and I'll sort of clarify my own position, is, you know, the first step in sort of talking about yourself is you need to look within. And that can be very scary and painful to do. And that can be scary and painful for me to do. So part of like the Mussar journey is looking within with kind of kindness and gentleness, and being able to kind of accept ourselves when we have opportunities for growth. So let's say we look and we say, oh yeah, I'm worried that I'm, you know, imposing on others. You know, everybody has so much going on. I don't want to share my mishigas, you know, and what I'm dealing with is really small compared to what so many other people are dealing with. And so if we sort of identify a challenge like that, and then we would say, okay, well, what's a soul trait which I could maybe cultivate, or that I could work on to help me overcome that, or to practice that? So can anybody think of a soul trait that might impact this? Yeah, Joanne.
Well, I was just going to say, it's the opposite of silence. I mean, the soul trait is silence, but it's kind of like not being silent. In 2011, after I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I found it very difficult to like tell the same thing to like numerous people. Well, how are you? What's going on? So what I did is I guess it would be today, you'd call it a blog, except it wasn't online. It was like I just sent an email to a lot of people, you know, telling them what was going on, what tests, and how I was handling it. And for some reason, because we're doing bitachon also, I just felt like, and I was like telling everyone before I even knew like what kind of cancer it was and what stage it was, but I'm saying I'm going to be okay, which was like kind of interesting because I didn't know that, but it turned out, thank God, that it was so.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm glad you're okay and still here. Yeah, Scale.
Me too.
Yes, I'm thinking of the soul trait of humility, because we can kind of erase ourselves from the conversation too. And you can't take up all the space in the room, but you're entitled to a seat at the table too. So working on that might give you the courage to say, I have a voice here too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Gail. What are thoughts about soul traits that we've worked on and might come into play? And by the way, Joanne, I would call that silence, because as I think about it, silence covers when we speak and when we don't speak. So, yes, Carrie.
What about trust? Trusting that other people will listen and honor your feelings, validate, or just listen. Right? But trusting that it's going to be okay to talk to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Trusting that things are going to be okay if we choose to talk. Yeah, wonderful. All right, well, maybe that's a good segue into kind of starting to delve into trust a little bit more. Let's see what we got going on here. So, as you probably recall, or if you're new here, don't come very often, we always start with one of these 4 different assumptions. These are kind of the backstory for the Mussar practice. So for those of you who don't have a lot of Jewish education, or you're new to Mussar, or like me, where I always need to be reminded of things which I've seen before, these kind of, when we look at these assumptions, these can kind of help fill in some of the backstory and help us move forward. And the one for today is this idea that we all have a divine spark, which is occluded by our baggage. This comes from the story of creation, where the divine in the Torah, it says the divine breathed life into the nostrils of Adam. It was something that, if you're following the yearly cycle, it was just part of last week's story. But that kind of spark of divinity, is something that we all share. Now, if you're not sure about the God, or if you're an atheist or agnostic, you can think about it as kind of the common goodness of humanity, or that 99.9% of identical DNA. But there's a certain assumption about there's a core of benevolence, but it can get blocked by the hurts that we've experienced, or maybe the hurts that they've experienced, which can make it hard to access that spark. So why is this important? How does this relate to kind of what we've been talking about so far? This idea that everyone has a little bit of divinity in them. Is something you agree with, disagree with?
Well, I agree. I always say that somebody always has something to impart to you, and you to them. So is that the divine working through us? I would say yes, it is. I'm constantly saying with my boyfriend that he teaches me things about myself, because he makes me go into myself and learn my vulnerabilities. And I just had an issue of expectations, and realizing that they're my expectations, they're not his expectations. And even if he knew my expectations, women, we don't tend to tell our timeline either, right? So therefore, by me kind of going into that, he also taught me something about myself. So I think, we do have that divine spark in us, because we're able to share. Even this, meeting, we're all sharing something. So, that's the divine working through us, making us have a thought so that we can tell everybody something.
Thank you, Shelley.
I think if we trust that everybody has that divine spark, this came up today in spirituality, how serendipitous that we were discussing religion and politics and how that, works in the courts and so forth. And one of our members said, basically, he doesn't use the term bottom line, but what he was saying is, ultimately, if you respect the other person as a human being, then that kind of supersedes all of that other stuff. And you're not going to, we were specifically talking about the treatment of LGBTQ people. But if you respect everybody as a human being and you trust that they have this goodness in them, but he didn't say that. He just said respect everybody as a human being, and that supersedes all the rest of it. You know, the Hillel quote, do not do to your neighbor what is hateful to you. And I thought, that's that divine spark, that thing, that whoever it is, you trust it's there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought it very much related to this idea of the divine spark.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to like what they're doing. We don't have to agree with what they're doing, but we can still respect them as a human being and, you know, treat them accordingly. So that brings us to trust. So we have a volunteer to read these two definitions of trust.
If you like, I can read.
Okay.
Trust is a powerful sense of optimism and confidence based not on reason or experience, but on emunah, faith. You know that God is good and he's the only one in charge, and therefore you have no fears or frets. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah.
Many Mussar masters argue that faith in God is required for Mussar practice in general and is a precursor to trust. I disagree, which is why faith is not one of the soul traits I teach. Marcus.
Yeah, so I'm put my opinion out there, but I also respect, you know, the position of Rabbi Tzvi Friedman. And so, you know, I think that's one of the challenges, because I'm sure that every one of us on this call has a different kind of sense of what the divine might be. And here we are trying to figure out, you know, okay, well, you know, can we get this sense of optimism and confidence in the world without it relying on the divinity? I don't know. What do people think, or how does that come together? How does it come together for you? I think our men in the call have been very, very quiet today. I'm the only one speaking. I'd love to hear from one of you. Randy, yeah. So mute yourself.
Yeah, I'm thoughtful on that topic of trust and faith. I know what we were just reading. I think it involves reason, and it involves things that are transcendent to reason. And when I have something that's hard to conceive of, I try to think of it like in a picture. Of why people get in trouble is because I think our natural tendency, or a tendency, like with that first quote about people's stomachs and other people's behaviors, we tend to make the wrong things important in life, like what other people do. Like if we are angry at someone, it's like, well, I can think of a situation where something happened to me, and it's hard to set that down. And I got thinking, well, I'm acting as if like this other person runs the universe, and that's not what I believe. It's like, no, someone else runs the universe. Even if you don't believe in God, you can still believe, well, there's something else that runs the universe than this one person. and it's like, well, cannot holding on to that good draw good to me? I'm not dependent on what that other person does to me. And like what you said before, is such a powerful concept of the value of each person, that there's good in each person. That's not how all human history has been. That was sort of a new idea, and it opens up such great possibility for us to all get along as human beings.
Thank you, Randy. That was beautiful. And I love the kind of vision of opening up of possibilities, and that, my world, I can't remember exactly what you said, but I loved it. It was like, my world does not revolve around what this other person does. They don't run the universe, and something else is running the universe. The universe is running itself. Yeah, beautiful.
And one of my sages from my spirituality group, and I really do think of this man as a sage, refers to it not as God, but as the universe's organizing principle.
Mm.
Just
Yeah.
Okay.
So if this is kind of, so why would we study trust? I mean, I haven't heard within this group like pushback on the idea of sort of trusting that things are going to work out, but I know many people have their doubts. I do myself sometimes. But why is it, at least for some of us, for those of us where it is a challenge, why would we focus on it? Many Mussar teachers just punt completely, and they don't talk about it. Yeah, Harry, what do you think?
What is the option? What's the alternative? That's the question.
Mm.
Anxiety, worry, hiding.
Mm.
It's not living.
Mm.
You have to have a mechanism to live. And I don't want to say anything about this election, but it's a great example.
Mm.
You got to trust. A matter of fact, it is, I heard that you have to trust the American people. I mean, there's a great example of trust, that the right thing will come.
Mm.
And that's all you could do, because the alternative is something, we don't have control of.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Who's on board with worry? Anybody? Anybody just want to worry all the time? Is that sort of nobody? No, yeah, that's a pretty crappy alternative, Yeah, that's no fun at all. So, how does trust combat worry?
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's trust.
So is this Justin speaking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Adding to what Harry said, I think trust is very important. And he said, what is the alternative to just worry all the time? And in my life, it's been like, it's not to trust other, like basically I have struggles with trusting other people, and I don't have anxiety necessarily, but I just trust myself.
Mm.
But I wish I could trust other people, but to do so, I would have to be more vulnerable. And that's the struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Justin. Yeah, there is a certain, was there more you wanted to say? Nope, I see you went on mute again. Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And as we've talked about a couple of times, vulnerability is hard, and trusting in other people can be a challenge. And here we're also talking about something which is related and unrelated to trusting other people, because it's almost like this worldview of the universe that, that things are eventually going to work out. Or this is a way to sort of combat worry. There's this wonderful Mark Twain quote. I can't remember it exactly, but it's like, some of the worst things I've ever been through actually happened.
Mm.
This idea that we can bring more suffering on ourselves worrying about what might happen than what actually does happen in the end.
Right. Faith.
So let's take this a step further. So we talked about some of this already, trust being a cure for fear and worry. It can also something, that can bring other soul traits into balance. And if it's hard, we might as well start practicing so we can get better. As I said, some people punt on this. I made this the 4th chapter in the book. It's hard. Let's get going. Okay, so here, again, for those of you who are new, we can think about these different soul traits as a continuum. And our goal is balance, and having too much can be just as bad as having not enough of a soul trait. So what's the danger of having too much trust?
Well, I think it's in your book, trust in God would tie your camel. It's like you can't just think that you don't have any responsibility in the outcome of things, or that you don't need a plan, or you don't, take some good action, because that's just foolish.
Yeah, we have a job to do as well. Yeah, absolutely. If I'm just trusting and I don't need to wear my seatbelt, well,
Or your mask. I've heard people say, oh, I don't need a mask, I have Jesus.
Yeah.
No, wear a mask. Have Jesus, but wear a mask.
Right.
Right. Okay. You remember staying with our own journey, but yes, that is a sign of something we can interpret as practicing too much trust, or within. I'm studying Torah, right? It's not just Christians; it's fundamental. People who are very religious. Oh, I have Torah, I have Minyan. I don't need to wear a mask. Well, I don't know. That's not how I would interpret things. And we talked about this other extreme before of having too little trust. Can lead to fear. Does anyone think of an example from their own life, or maybe some of these extremes had come into play that they would like to share, and maybe how working on this was helpful? Unclear.
I felt I learned that I was too gullible. So I was on the side of recklessness, where I trusted too much. And it definitely caused me problems, yes. So that's one aspect I found on that side is out of balance, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Carrie?
With the pandemic, I found that I was very mistrustful of anyone outside of my own little world, and to the point of where I was paralyzing myself, not going shopping and doing other things. And I had to fight that and reevaluate the fear, because it wasn't rational and or backed up with evidence. So that was what I was dealing with trust the last several months, was trying to trust and start living again, but still being careful at the same time.
Being careful, but not so careful that we're not living.
Right.
Thank you. Justin?
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem.
So I went from not trusting, I went from trusting too much in like friends and things like that, to not trusting others at all, to just trusting myself. And then you get to a point you realize not everything's in your own hands and you just have to have faith. And now I just have faith as well.
Yeah, that's a balancing, that's an important balancing, Justin. And I think many people, when we're out of balance for a trait, we find that we can go to both extremes. I'll go from, my humility's out of balance. I'll go from feeling really shy and awkward and not wanting to say anything to dominating the conversation. And that's a sign of kind of, being out of balance. But as we go through our practice and we take actions to sort of bring ourselves more towards balance, we'll find that we kind of come back towards the middle. that we will lose sort of those behaviors on both extremes.
Interesting.
True.
Okay, so now I found this today. If you got the email earlier today, I shared some of this quote, and I found this really provocative and a very strong perspective. So maybe I have a volunteer to read this teaching for us, please. Maybe someone we haven't heard from yet today. Janos, what about you? I haven't heard your voice in a couple of weeks. Would you be willing to read for us?
I can try, but I have a heavy accent, so if you don't understand half, read it for yourself. Along with
I love your accent.
the deep, unquestioned sense of security and trust in the essential goodness and righteousness of reality becomes the foundation for the process of awakening. This sense of so basic that changing circumstances and events cannot disrupt it. This quality of basic trust allow you to relax and just be with whatever is.
Okay, thank you. Let me pause you there. So what are some phrases that kind of jump out for you? So this is from Rabbi Sheffa Gold. So what is, and this is to the group, what is her point? What is she arguing here?
I feel like it is beautiful, by the way. The first thing that popped up in my mind was presence and clarity.
Presence and clarity. Can you say a little more about that, what you mean?
I feel like it was talking to me and telling me that the more present, as in being in the now, allowed the process of awakening to open me up to the clarity. Because if I have clarity, then I could sense the basic changing circumstances, events that are not mine or that cannot disrupt it. I'm present and aware, bringing me clearer. I may act, I may not need to act, but I can feel without being reactive, is what I'm getting from this. It's beautiful. I love it.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Is that...
Yeah, it does to me. What do other people think? What do you take from this? Or what do you disagree with about this? Or what doesn't connect with you about this?
I think the rainbow embodies faith in a beautiful way because it reminds us that no matter how bad things can get, there will always be a better day.
There will always be a better day. Thank you. I love that.
Okay, this is Wendy. I think it's so important to understand reality, to give us courage to face it when we don't have trust. Because when I was little, and I mean, this is really weird, but I was just afraid of everything that moved. Ants and dogs and people, I was afraid. And my mother helped me through that and combat that by patiently explaining to me the reality of ants, reality of dogs, et cetera, et cetera. It finally kicked in one day and I wasn't afraid of them anymore. In fact, I was like mesmerized by everything that moved. But I don't know why I was so afraid, but that's just so true. Reality gives us that strength.
Yeah, to just be with whatever is. Thank you for sharing that, Wendy. Okay, we have another volunteer to read the second paragraph. I think some of you have probably read ahead, but that's okay. We can read it again together.
I could volunteer.
Sure.
The rainbow reminds us that whatever happens, we are safe. Even when terrible things happen, the outer structures are destroyed, and we are seemingly paralyzed by fear. the rainbow appears to remind us of a deeper safety. Yes, even death is safe. Rabbi Sheffield Gold.
Thank you. Even death is safe? Whoa. That's kind of hardcore.
It's like even falling down a flight of stairs is safe. Come on.
Yeah.
How do we define? How is she defining safety?
I don't know.
Is she saying you won't be physically hurt? You won't be mentally hurt?
But what she's saying is that there's a higher reality beyond the hurt that may happen to you. I just don't happen to go along with it.
Mm.
She's saying paralyzed by fear.
Yeah, what does it mean seemingly paralyzed by fear? I've been paralyzed by fear. It didn't seem like I was paralyzed.
Yeah, paralyzed by fear. That exists. I was attacked in Santa Monica 2 weekends ago.
Wow.
Didn't know the person was homeless. I didn't know. I was just walking and my family was behind me and I saw a bench and I wanted to look at the bench because I'm in rec and leisure. I'm a rec and leisure major and I'd like to see what they do with benches. I mean, like bus benches, park benches. I'm just, like to see it. So I went over to see that. I don't disturb the person, I guess. And he lunged at me.
Oh.
And then I felt that second of being paralyzed by fear, but then I realized that I'm kind of not the fight person, I'm kind of the flight person because I turned to run. And I didn't have to run because the bench was actually there to protect me. And so yeah, that's being paralyzed by fear and lacking that trust can put you right there. And if you stay paralyzed by fear, that's not safe.
Yeah, I think the research has said that when I grew up, it was fight or flight. Now it's flight or freeze. And I've experienced that as well. That sort of like, but I think the question, and that's a biological reaction, but the question is, is that always the case? And how do we get out of that? And sometimes, it's really not like a dangerous situation, but we still sort of have worries or fears that can paralyze us or hold us back. So this is pretty provocative.
Well, can I add something interesting that few people use it, that when you think about it, this is function of our automatic nervous system that we will either fight or flight or freeze. But there is a fourth dimension as well. It's a surrender. You don't need to fight always. You don't need to run away. And if you are not frozen and you accept it, then you can surrender to that even temporarily and experience it.
Thank you. There's a lot of discussion of surrender in the literature about trust and trusting the divine. Again, it doesn't mean if you're in physical danger, we're trusting and we're tying our camel, and sometimes our camel rightly wants to run away. But we could choose not to. We could choose in many situations to just surrender and accept what is. Because whatever, like, again, with this election, whatever happens, there's going to be a lot of upset people. And none of us as individuals can control what happens. And we're going to need to accept it, one way or another.
And the sun will come up next day for sure.
Bet your bottom dollar.
All right, so let's get ready to head into our breakouts. Okay, so the first full Mussar book written was Duties of the Heart, written in the 11th century in Judeo-Arabic in Spain, hundreds of years before the printing press was invented, and yet it sits on my shelf and many other shelves. And so what Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakuda wrote was, one who trusts in the divine neither worries nor laments. And so I've had periods in my life where I've really felt like the sense of sort of trust that I was okay, whatever happened. Um, I had a certain confidence and a certain energy about me. Then some things happened and that kind of went away and I sort of got away from it. And this year I'm actually trying to get back to that. And it's not easy, especially in the world the way it is today. But with your partner, I'd like you to say, what role does worry or lament play in your life? And do you think you should worry more or less? And what might you do to kind of bring trust into better balance? So, let me see. Let's get the breakout rooms going here. Okay, so if you are new to this, you should see something on your page that says join breakout room. And so click to join. We'll have about 5 minutes.
I don't know what happened. It's supposed to be 7. No, try again.
Joanne, did you join? It looks like you did. Excellent. All right, well, those of you on the live streaming services, this is where I'm going to stop the streaming. So thank you so much for being here. I encourage you to head over to americanmussar.com and sign up to be on the mailing list or go to our Facebook page to kind of click the Zoom link and join live in person next time if you would like to participate further. So have a wonderful week. Hey everyone, welcome back. So how was that experience, sort of talking about trust and worries and lamenting? What did anyone come up with any practices that might help help you move towards balance? Justin enjoyed it. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Harry.
Basically, I mentioned that I'm taking a course at Penn about positivity. And Marty Seligman, I know I shared something with you.
Yes, yeah.
In the course, but he said something that made me sort of feel good. He says, worry is a natural state of human beings because, when we were developed thousands of years ago, there was danger all over. We had to worry about everything. So in order to survive, worry is natural. It's how we're wired. And to become more positive takes effort to work on it. So I just want to share that thought that that our default is worry, and that's there to protect you. But you got to know how to balance it out. You got to bring positivity in your life, and you can. And then he wrote the famous book called "Learned Optimism," that put him on the map. That you can learn to be optimistic, and they talk about how to do it. So that's my contribution in that area.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. And one of the things I really liked, and one of the things I think is so important about remembering that worry is natural, is we don't want to throw gas in the fire by beating ourselves up for worrying. I shouldn't be worrying, and I'm such a terrible person, I'm such a schlub, so I'm worrying all the time. It's like, worry happens. It's part of the picture, but we don't have to, we don't have to be ruled by it and controlled by it. And we can accept that too.
True.
Yeah, Gail, were you raising your hand?
Yes. Yeah, we were saying that a lot of what you can do or what you seem to need to do that helps to build trust and bring yourself more into balance is knowledge, information. It's the sense of loss of control that makes you spiral down and feel like you don't have trust. So if you have coping mechanisms that you know will work for you, or if you can get some knowledge or information about your situation, that can bring you to a more stable place that you can act from.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Gail. Other thoughts? Well, these are a few that I came up with from my own thinking from the literature. Some actions that we could do to, you know, asking the divine or higher power or someone else for help. You know, that's one way to combat it. Using the mantra to counter worry. Surrendering your need for a particular outcome. I think that matches with what Janos shared and also what Gail was just saying is, you know, the reality is we're not in control of much of anything. And our country and a lot of marketing likes to make it seem like we should be in control or whatever, but COVID has taught us anything. It's like how little control we actually have. That when nature wants to act, it is going to act, and there's nothing we can do about it. Taking action to help other people, why is that a good thing to do if you're feeling worried?
It takes you outside of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also practice what's called personal trust. You know, I used to, until it broke, I used to have this wonderful bracelet with a hamsa, you know, which is the little Jewish hand, and it's also outside the Jewish world in the Middle East. But I would like hold the little hand to just say, okay, I'm not alone. There are other people here. And this idea that whatever happens, we will be able to handle it. Let's take that idea into our closing meditation. Please once again relax and close your eyes. Taking a deep breath through the nose and hold. And a long and leisurely exhale and hold. Let's just imagine the inner divinity, that best self, always being with us. And that when worry starts to hit, yourself looking within and remembering that light and that strength that's always there to support us. Whether it's someone holding your hand or giving you an encouraging word or a pat on the back. But you are not alone. Take a moment of gratitude for those souls together with us in this call who've chosen to spend an hour together. Across many thousands of miles and many time zones, we've been together, supporting one another on our journey. And let us set an intention to remember that feeling of companionship as we go through the next week. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.